Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Welcome to the Clause podcast, where we discuss issues of the day which are important and which are interesting to everybody. Here, in this case, what we're going to discuss is something which is one of the saddest things which happened in our history, which was the Pulwama attacks in 2019. That's on February 14th. So that was such a shock which happened to in India, and I think it resonated across the country in terms of 40 soldiers getting killed, and a convoy of 78 vehicles which was going, and the I think there was a kind of rage at that point of time across the country that such a thing could have been allowed. How did this happen? There was an outcry, but of course the country responded very well with the Balakot attacks, and subsequently, for so far so good, we've seen things have sort of taken a downturn. Terrorist activities virtually stopped over the next few years. And I think what we did was we basically outgamed the Pakistanis. We didn't play the game that they were playing with us for years. But in terms of, they would do whatever they liked and we didn't respond. This time we did. It was, I think, one of the few cases in history where you could go under a nuclear overhang and still get your message across. So I think that was pretty unique, pretty gutsy. It was not without its dangers because you had a counter-attack by the Pakistanis. But whatever the outcome of that was, that terrorism went down, infiltration went down. But as I think most of us who've been in this business know, that you cannot rule out Pakistan at any time. As far as I'm concerned, it's a 365-day, 24/7 threat. So when we look back and say that this, do you, what I have my guests with me, let me introduce my guests. We've got Professor Ashok Behuria, Ambassador Raghavan, both extremely well known in their fields. I don't think they need a formal introduction, but Ashok Behuria is from IDSA. Ambassador, of course, was in Pakistan for a long time. So they are very well placed to see where do we go from here. I mean, what do you see in the future? While things have been good, terrorism has picked up, as you know, recently in J&K. There have been some pretty ominous noises from across in Pakistan also. You had recently, you had the Hamas, for example. Hamas, 3 of them came and they were with LET. Those names are there in the media. So clearly, while the terrorism infiltration may have gone down, terrorism activities in Pakistan has not. Many of them are sitting quiet for a long time, but now again they're slowly coming up. They're beginning to show, Jaish-e-Mohammed, LET, they're all beginning to again occupy a public space. So I would perhaps begin with you, Ambassador Raghavan. How do you see this going in terms of the threat to us, in terms of what does Pakistan, would it be likely to take such a risk again?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. What you said was quite true. I think the fact that we are on the threshold of the anniversary of Pulwama makes it incumbent on us to try to analyze the situation. And to put it very briefly, I would agree that both the surgical strikes earlier and especially the action which we took after the Pulwama terrorist attack has changed the red lines. In a sense, it has very strongly signaled a lowering of our threshold. And that has had, I would say, a good impact. But I think when we discuss in terms of lowering of thresholds or changing the red lines, we are still in the kinetic or tactical realm. And the question really also is of what is the larger strategy which we have to follow with regard to Pakistan. I think the tactical part, the kinetic part is a near constant, and it is something which every country has in its arsenal and will certainly deploy wherever it is required. But along with tactics, you also need a broader strategic policy approach. And that, with regard to Pakistan, is something which I think we need to examine and discuss to understand where we are and where we are headed.
That's interesting. How do we get the whole, what shall I say, other partners also to put pressure on Pakistan, which we've tried earlier? In that context, I was just wondering, if you compare 2019 and now, Pakistan's economy was in bad shape even then. During Kargil, it was worse. So clearly, economy, they don't care. However bad it is, they will do what they have to do. The military is in a better position now because far strong. At that time, if you remember, Asim Bajwa had just taken over that economic, what was that grouping he had taken over. That was a big thing. Now you've got the Pakistan chief. He's virtually in charge of the whole country. One interesting thing is that while in 2019 CPEC was going full steam forward, now maybe funds from various countries are not coming that easily. Neither is China quite willing to put money there, where it once was interested, nor are the Saudis, nor is UAE. Ashok, how would you see this? Do you think a kind of post-Pulwama, I won't say a direct correlation, but post-Pulwama, would you say that this Pakistan has gone further into a kind of hole?
We have to look at Pulwama slightly differently. I look at it slightly differently, in the sense that it is a spoiler act which was occasioned by certain events that preceded it. Like in February 2018, you saw Bajwa changing his line on neighborhood relations, suddenly talking about the need for ceasefire. And a couple of weeks before Pulwama happened, you found Tariq Aziz, Musharraf's friend, and he was in charge of the back channel as well, suddenly appearing in Indian embassy, Indian High Commission in Pakistan, Islamabad, and telling them that we want to go forward, move forward, and there has to be peace. If you look at the spoiler acts from 2014, ever since Modi came to power, you find that all these attacks, Pathankot, Uri, they have taken place exactly when there have been some movement on India-Pakistan front. So you have a spoiler constituency within the army or the intelligence which has always reacted to that. And Pulwama, I would say that it could have been a reaction to Tariq suddenly appearing from nowhere, talking about peace, and Bajwa changing his gears all of a sudden. So if you look at it closely, you find that there is a spoiler constituency even within the army, perhaps not entirely under the control of the army chief and the line organization that it is, which is trying to dictate terms to India-Pakistan leadership to take the relationship forward or backward. So in that sense, I would say Pulwama can be looked at from that perspective. But in terms of the response that we developed, that has perhaps deterred them to a certain extent. Like at the moment, I don't think the spoilers want something like Balakot to happen again. Under the nuclear overhang, as you said, we intensified the conventional response to Pulwama. It was a sub-conventional act, but our response was conventional, and that effectively deterred them because the predictability about Indian behavior was overcome. Like we also were unpredictable in our own way. So in that sense, we have effectively deterred the spoilers to a certain extent. But I will not say that we have deterred them entirely, because we have seen now this thing coming up again. But whether it will be of the scale that Pulwama was remains to be seen. Let us not forget that when you talk about terrorism as a strategy that Pakistan is using vis-a-vis India, it is a very low-cost affair. Like the investment in terms of resources is very low. We have tried to scale up the cost of this strategy by responding to them in the way that we did. And that really had some deterring effect. As we see, from 2019 till today, about almost 5.5 years have passed, the terror curve has gone down to a certain extent.
I think in that, the major thing we did was Article 370. And That I think shocked because I remember when that happened, I was in conversation with a lot of Pakistanis back in Washington, and it shocked them. Nobody expected it. So that also was in a way shock tactic.
Unpredictable.
And it took separatism off the table. And effectively, that's what happened. You couldn't talk separatism anymore. It had no meaning. But what you said about spoiler is really interesting. And I'm wondering, I remember once Nawaz Sharif saying that every time we talk peace, there is an attacker. He made that comment. But do you think that, say, Bangladesh now, there's been a lot of Pakistani activity there. So we should always look at something, like you said correctly, they may not risk a Pulwama, but they would try to do something else. So do you think Bangladesh could prove a kind of a jump-off point again for the Pakistanis to launch something in the forthcoming days?
Well, we should certainly be prepared for those kind of possibilities. And part of national security planning is being prepared for these kind of developments, and it is on the cards because there is a major churn which is underway in Bangladesh. Whether the Pakistanis have the capability to take advantage of it, or whether there will be indigenous elements in Bangladesh who will use the current situation, we don't know, but we certainly have to be prepared for those situations. But in my view, we also have to think ahead. You said quite correctly that the Pakistan challenge is something we have to be prepared for 24/7, 365 days a year. Yes, of course, it goes without saying. But for how long? Forever? I remember Professor Cohen had written a book about India and Pakistan shooting for a century. And it may well be that, yes, we will be shooting for a century for till 2047, till 2147, 2247. I think in the end we also need to game it in much more comprehensive terms. I think when you're dealing with a recalcitrant and deeply adversarial neighbor like Pakistan, for us to securitize the relationship, that Pakistan will try to excessively securitize the relationship is a given. But for us also to securitize the relationship and not use our other strengths. And what are our other strengths? Our other strengths are the stability of our political system, our democratic traditions, the strength of our economy, the openness of your cultural traditions. All of those are strengths, and unless we bring those into play, we will really be playing a short-term tactical game with Pakistan. So we need a more comprehensive approach, and that comprehensive approach certainly by no means that you undermine your security aspects of your preparedness or your capacity to undertake kinetic actions.
If you look at the GDP, the differential between the two, that has risen sharply after 2019. Again, not a direct correlation, but that I was just checking the figures. Ours has been climbing and theirs has literally been starting to taper. But that's aside. When we say we need to have a kind of strategy, like you said, we need to have a strategic deterrence also in place. The problem is nobody is interested in Pakistan now. Nobody really wants to either, to kind of, it's not there in the international dialogue. I mean, there's a lot of Trump, all this is going on. Who's talking about Pakistan? So in this context, will you say, Ashok, that say China is beginning to sort of back off a little? It has always been against radical Islamism. I mean, it doesn't like that sort of turn at all. But that doesn't follow that China may not help in, say, non-Islamic terrorist activities, like the Khalistani issue. I don't know. I mean, whether that will work. Why did the Khalistan issue suddenly sort of go up over the last 2 years? There was a huge spike with protests across. So Pakistan also knows, I think, that the Islamist thing, doesn't have much currency. So, like you said, Ambassador, we need to look at other areas where they might create trouble for us. So, how do you think China is reacting to all this? I mean, in terms of the...
You see, to bring China in here is slightly, I would say, would be slightly off focus in the sense that yes, intelligence cooperation between Pakistan and China have scaled new heights. In fact, they are talking to each other much more than ever before, and I don't think China has that kind of a robust intelligence cooperation with any other country in the world. That is true. While I say that, let us not forget history. In 1995, when I think Jiang Zemin had come to Pakistan, he had advised Pakistan to borrow the China-India model, and he had told them that keep your problems aside, trade, and trade. So that was an interesting point to make. In 1999, when Nawaz Sharif was forced to go to Beijing, China said we cannot do anything. Go to US.
Oh yeah.
So China has maintained some kind of a distance as far as India-Pakistan relationship is concerned. But are they getting together? Now that they have a common issue with India, like they had an issue before, but now that US is also part of the entire geostrategic calculus in this region. So whether they are coming in together, whether they're trying to box us into South Asian realm, that is something that we will have to wait and see. But I would like to take off from where Ambassador Raghavan left when he's talking about expanding the ambit of your strategy. And from kinetic you have to get into the non-kinetic modes as well. There are certain things that we should talk about. When we talk about Pakistan, we often say that Pakistan will never leave India. They will continue to organize terror attacks against us. So this is something which is a given. That is the kind of lens that we employ to look at Pakistan. But there are other lenses to it, as well. Like I will say, like if you just look at this political creature called Nawaz Sharif. He claims his Kashmiri origin. At one point of time, he was the one who came out to this Kashmiri Solidarity Day. Then he became the ardent supporter of India-Pakistan amity. And look at his gods in 2013. What irritated the army the most in Pakistan was his statement that both countries people हम भी आलू गोश्त खाते हैं वो भी आलू गोश्त खाते हैं and we should tie up together. So from being somebody who was so evidently anti-India on Kashmir issue, he came down to saying that we want peace. And look at this. In 2013 elections, even if he is saying that I will have peace with India, I will make peace with India, he scores about 15 million votes. He secures. And in 2018, when the army is after him, Imran is after him, Imran is branding him as non-Islamic. Army is branding him as Modi ka yaar, Gaddar, Gaddar. Do you know how much votes he polled? He polled about 13 million votes. Not too low. And he stuck to his line that I will better relationship between India and Pakistan. So that suggests, and today also in the 2024 elections, he has secured about 14 million votes. So you have a constituency in Pakistan which is uninfluenced by the army's rhetoric or army's way of branding India as an enemy. So when you are strategizing vis-a-vis Pakistan, you should not look at it from one single lens. So there are several lenses through which you can approach Pakistan. And if you have a long-term perspective, you cannot only succumb to army's Pakistan and keep looking at Pakistan as army's Pakistan. So you have to have a strategy which is comprehensive in a manner that while you take care of the security threats emerging from Pakistan, you should also have a line of thinking coming in to nurture, nourish and expand the constituency of peace within Pakistan. How best you can do it depends on the kind of diplomatic strength that you have.
So Ambassador Raghavan, do you agree?
Well, I agree entirely. But I just want to go back to the question you had asked about China and Pakistan. And certainly the strength of the Pakistan-China relationship is something which we always have to keep in mind. We have to closely study, monitor, make our own defense and political and diplomatic preparations accordingly. But we shouldn't let us frighten us into thinking only in a certain predetermined manner. For instance, and let me give a concrete example. Why should Pakistan agree to a ceasefire on the line of control at a time when India-China relations on the line of actual control
Yes.
had plummeted
Yes.
so much,
Yeah.
and in fact had reached their
Very
lowest
true.
ever
Yes.
stage in 50
Absolutely.
years?
Yes.
How do we reconcile that development which actually took place with theories about the Pakistan-China tactical alliance to put pressure on India? Because actually Pakistani behavior reduced pressure on India. At the time when the ceasefire was announced, it was...
Yeah, it's an excellent point.
So I think we shouldn't get frightened into taking predetermined notions or indulge in a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy all the time. Certainly, as I keep emphasizing, when you're dealing with a country which is inherently unstable, which has deeply adversarial perceptions about India, it's always going to be a risky business. But given the strength of your position, I think certain element of risk taking you have to inbuilt into your policy approaches.
No, I think that's an excellent point. But Ambassador, since you've gone through this personally, a lot of it, you've seen it up front. What we've seen is, even that issue of we'll make Pakistan the strategic connectivity, which was actually a fantastic idea. If Pakistan can actually upscale itself and say that we are the crossroads for this part of the subcontinent, it would gain immensely. But that never finally, that I think the bureaucracy plus the army plus, that alliance is...
I think it's
seems
a
to
more
be,
no. I think it's a larger issue because you have to see Pakistan-India relations as a subset of your wider South Asian situation. You don't have a linear, stable relationship in neighborhoods ever. It's not as if India-Nepal relations have been on a stable, linear path forever, or India-Bangladesh relations, or India-Sri Lanka relations, or any other relationship. Why should the Pakistani relationship be any different? It will have ups and downs because that reflects the realities of South Asia, that you are the preponderant power and others are all smaller countries who have a great deal of unresolved identity and numerous other issues which are tied up with how they view India. So it's a complicated business. To expect that Pakistan will behave in one way for all times to come is, I think, being unrealistic.
But just to switch back to the terrorism, since we're discussing the whole Pulwama thing, like we said, for a while the terrorists were keeping quiet. You heard nothing about the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Recently, we've seen a huge spike in activity in POK. You've seen the army making statements. So that is worrisome. Why would they suddenly come out? You had the Hamas, like we said earlier, the Hamas coming in with the Lashkar-e-Taiba. The Jaish-e-Mohammed, I think its training facilities have reopened. That was in the media. I don't know how much that is true. Would you like to come in on that?
Well, if you look at this internal security situation in Pakistan today. Going by Pakistani figures, our figures are very high. Even the figures put out by TTP is very high. The TTP say that they have conducted 1,758 attacks in a year in 2024. But the Pakistani accounts say that they had faced 592 attacks. Out of that, 95% of the attacks were in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. There were 12 attacks in Sindh and 11 attacks in Punjab. So in the face of this kind of attacks that Pakistani security machinery has encountered, what would you expect them to do? The first and foremost, they would like to divert the attention of these people towards something else.
Yeah.
And mind you, TTP is a conglomerate. It is a conglomerate of about 41, 42 outfits. And whatever little I could gather from my interaction with the people in Pakistan, they would tell me that in about 14, 15 out of them have made peace with Pakistan, and Pakistan Pakistani security machinery has promised them to equip them with weapons and training to target some other country like India. So the spike that you see could be because of that constituency being diverted towards India. But I'm also told that they are on a tight list. It's not that they're being allowed to go and cause mayhem across the LOC. So that's a very interesting point, that I get to hear from Pakistani friends. So in that sense, I would say that the kind of attack that we saw in Pulwama may not be there, but we should be ready, because the kind of OGWs that are popping up in J&K, and the kind of attacks they are making, they are trying to communalize the valley again. So in the face of it, we have to be prepared for this kind of spoiler acts. But at the same time, we should have our eyes fixed, as Ambassador said, on the larger picture as to how to take the process forward. As I told you, like when Bajwa was contemplating reconciliation with India, this was all happening. This was so contradictory. You see, I would take you back on 26th November 2008. What had happened? On the very same day, at 8 p.m. in the night, the two foreign ministers, Pranab Mukherjee from our side and Shah Mahmood Qureshi from Pakistani side, shook hands and promised to take the peace process forward, which was put on hold. And 2 hours later, you had Mumbai. So the spoiler act that has been there, they have driven India-Pakistan relationship for long. So it is a spoiler-driven process. How to take this out of the spoiler's hands remains
But then, that kind
a
of...
question to be answered.
Sorry. So that kind of, you assume then that the control within the army is not complete, that there is sections who are profiting. I remember there were reports long back of how the money being given for infiltration, a lot of it was being rifled by local agencies. And so there is a lot of money in this. Ambassador, do you think that there is a lack of coherence, especially now, with Asim Munir in the chair? He doesn't have quite the kind of, what should we say, the charisma or the background which other chiefs had. And plus the country is in a turmoil. So do you think the spoiler aspect, which I completely agree it is there, do you think that could sort of again take hold?
Well, one can never say. And frankly, it's impossible to prove or disprove in any quantitative way as to what is a spoiler act and what is not. We are reading the tea leaves. But what do we know about Pakistan? And one thing which is very clear is that it's a deeply dysfunctional system. If they are unable to check terrorist attacks on themselves, they are hardly in a position to keep on a tight leash all the other terrorist groups which are over there. And we know that for a large number of years, that country has been a cocktail of all kinds of groups and ideologies and people jostling amongst themselves for authority. So I would say in such a dysfunctional system, if you think that someone can crack the whip and keep everything under control, it's being somewhat unrealistic. There will always be messy situations where Pakistan is concerned, because it's a messed up country, and the situation it is confronting also is deeply messed up. So we cannot have a cut and dried situation with Pakistan where we are concerned. This is the nature of the neighborhood we inhabit. We have to see what is in our interest. And I would, say that we have to look at it from a wider frame, given the overall situation in South Asia. Very troubled relationships are emerging. The extent to which we can stabilize relations with Pakistan will be a good thing.
We should allow Pakistan to go down all by itself.
Yeah.
No, but
If you are saying that the GDP is falling, everything is in a messy
I
situation.
think Ambassador is right. It's a mess. It's not, institutions are corroded. But like we said, in that case, it's a very dangerous situation when really nobody is in charge. So you don't know what could come out from there.
So we have to think of it from our point of view. And I think what we want is a stable environment. We want a stable external
So a
environment.
stable Pakistan is in our interest.
Well, the way it is put, but the counter question is a neighbor which you have deeply adversarial relations, which has nuclear weapons. Do you want deeply unstable
Yes.
Pakistan? No, you don't.
You don't.
Who has
So
left with
the-
very bad choices.
Yes. So you're choosing from a menu of bad options.
Bad options.
So I think we can close this on the conclusion that things are going to remain very, very unstable. You're not clear what's going to come out in 2025. Pulwamas may happen, or something entirely different could happen from there, given the multiplicity of factors within Pakistan, given an unstable neighborhood, given the erosion of Pakistan itself. But there's no ready path ahead for us as of now, though one hopes that there will be, like you said, we need to look at other alternatives of. In fact, I do think a stable Pakistan which is intent on trade would be ideal, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime now. It only remains for me to thank you both for, as always, an extremely interesting discussion with such fantastic points. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.